Before we get started, there will be spoilers for the 1000-year Blood War arc of Bleach in the video to follow. So, just the other day, the first early screenings were held for episodes 1 and 2 of the second Cour, alternatively episodes 14 and 15 of the 1000-year Blood War arc anime on the whole, and reactions have been extremely positive. As a result, we've also been given a few new details, leaks, spoilers, whatever you want to call them, regarding the content of the episodes themselves. Now, while admittedly I'm trying to avoid most of it as I like to go into the episodes as fresh as possible, it's inevitable you'll see some of it just by browsing the likes of Reddit and Twitter. And in this video, I wanted to address some of the most interesting tidbits I've picked up and seen about episodes 14 and 15. Also, as a side note, Kubo himself was there for the screenings and was celebrating his birthday with this amazing looking con cake. So a happy, healthy birthday to him, and as always, an enormous thank you for creating this world that we all love so much. Before we really begin, the official website for the Bleach anime has a synopsis available for episode 14. While the translation isn't perfect, it's easy enough to decipher, and I've tried to neaten it up a little bit. It reads as follows. As Ichigo tries to return to the Seirete from the Soul King's palace, the monk stops him, saying that he cannot win against Yhwach at this rate. At the same time, in the Vandenreich, while the sternritter stand side by side, Yhwach nominates a successor. Appearing on the stage is Uryu, the last surviving Quincy in this world. Due to this sudden development, tensions run high through the Knights, and Basby, who can't hide his dissatisfaction, speaks with Hashwolf, while Uryu himself proceeds to ask Yhwach a question. Presumably, this is only really the first half of episode 14, as it covers up to the beginning of chapter 554. Anyway, on to the new stuff. Now, everything is a little jumbled up as it's all being collated from so many disparate sources and reactions, but here's what I've managed to glean so far. Again, without being too spoiler-laden regarding what actually happens in episodes 1 and 2. The first set of information mostly comes from a Reddit post helpfully put together by a user called Dragon Puncher, so thank you for that. Episode 1, or 14, is predictably called The Last 9 Days, and I have to imagine it ends on chapter 546. Supposedly, episodes 14 and 15 cover a total of 9 chapters altogether, meaning episode 15 probably ends on chapter 551, with Toshiro's defeat and Kisuke calling Mayuri to let him know he has a way of recovering the stolen bankai. It's a good place to end the episode. I personally predicted it would end a chapter later, with Daiguren Hyorinmaru violently rejecting Kangdu, but this works as well. As always, due to the anime team adding extra scenes and whatnot here and there, and we'll get into that in a moment, it's possible the structure won't always be an exact one-to-one adaptation of the source material, meaning the episode could end halfway through a chapter or something. Just as an example, I could see episode 15 ending dramatically, just as Hitsugaya is struck by Basby's burner finger 2, and it ends on a close-up of his eyes or something, as it looks like he has seriously been defeated. It's probably not likely, but it's just a thought nonetheless. Now, apparently there are a lot of new scenes even within these first 2 episodes alone, which is exactly what we like to hear. And it means I'm going to have my work cut out for me when I get the chance to review the episodes, but that's alright, as that's one of my favourite parts of creating those videos, is seeing where the new scenes are being implemented. But the new scenes supposedly include Ichigo's training with Ichibei, which we all anticipated, something to do with Amida, I'm not sure what, that's pretty cryptic. I'm wondering if he maybe gets seriously wounded by BG9 or something. Regardless, it's probably some kind of an extension to his involvement in that fight, and then an extension to the Hitsugaya versus Basby fight as well, which is really cool, and apparently the animation for it is incredible too. And that honestly surprises me just a little bit. I mean, this Cour is already going to have at least 3 fights that I would argue are absolute milestone moments that should be treated with the same, or at least similar amount of gravitas as the Yamamoto versus Yhwach one. But the more the merrier. Now, we already saw some elements of this fight being extended, I think, as we heard new lines from Hitsugaya and who I presume to be Bazby in the last trailer. I only hope Kangdo's section of the fight gets extended too, though based on what we're seeing here, that won't be until episode 3. I just hope that he doesn't kind of get pushed to the wayside in favour of extending a fight that was already a decent length to begin with. Now, apparently Bambietta's implied sex scene is included, which I am a little surprised by. If you watched my trailer breakdown, you'll know I fully expected it to be cut, what with them cutting the more suggestive scenes in the first Cour. Plus, it looks like the Bambis as a unit are going to be introduced earlier in the anime than they are in the source material, so maybe they'll just change the structure of that round a little bit, or maybe their inclusion in the sternritter meeting is tiny, perhaps a single line at best, meaning they'll still need a proper introduction afterwards anyway. Regardless, when looking at it from the perspective of the characters, it does make sense to keep this moment. It kind of gives us an interesting insight into Bambietta as this cruel, femme fatale Black Widow-style character, even though it's never really brought up again afterwards. There's also apparently more 3D being used throughout the Cour already, which I'm not too surprised by, as I think we were told that was going to be the case beforehand. I do wonder where it's being used this early on, though. Komomura's bankai, for example, certainly doesn't appear yet, so I'm wondering where and how it's being included. Just off the top of my head, I could see perhaps BG9's tendrils being 3D, for example, though that might look odd, especially when interacting at high speeds with a character like Soifon. But, I mean, we'll have to see. One of the biggest reveals, however, is that after the screening, Kubo mentioned there will be extra scenes for both the Bambis and, wait for it, UKITAKE in Cour 3. This is awesome news that I think everyone has been hoping to hear. I've said it before that Cour 3 definitely needed some expansion, and of course UKITAKE is an amazing candidate for that. I'm not going to be so optimistic as to hope he actually gets a fully fleshed out fight scene, but some kind of in-depth flashback of his childhood and his meeting Mimihagi would be absolutely incredible, as in the source material, that moment, that fateful meeting was given, I think it was like a page at best, so fleshing that out would be absolutely wonderful. Imagine if there is some kind of setup for the Hell chapter to come. I mean, I know that is totally wishful thinking, but if that ever happened, then we'd really be blurring the lines between the anime and the source material in a very intriguing way. As for the new scene for the Bambis, that's an interesting one. I'm not sure if the new Bambi scenes are in this upcoming Cour or the next, but regardless, I'm down for any sternritter receiving extra attention. I'm still holding out for Robert and BG9's Shrifts. I feel like they have to be a given at this rate. That seems like such an obvious thing to include. Perhaps the new Bambi scenes are a fleshed out battle against Byakuya. That would include Candice, Meninas, and Lil Toto after all, and simultaneously give us the chance to see Robert's Shrift. I don't know why, but I've always really loved entertaining the idea of actually getting to see some semblance of a fight between Byakuya and Robert, even if the source material seems to imply that it wouldn't be much of one. Now, one last detail that I found on Twitter, which may actually be the original source for most of this, regardless it's on the screen either way, is that the anime team is being particular about the colour of the sky during the invasion, as well as the ground once the Sternritter have invaded, and that it will be similar in appearance to the trailer. Now, of course, the red sky of the second invasion has become almost something of a meme at this point among the community. It's definitely one of the most contentious talking points. But I assume what this basically means is that at times it will probably appear slightly translucent, just like it does in the original material, to allow us to see the sky outside itself every now and then from beneath the veil. Either way, I'm happy to see they're once again paying very close attention to detail. Like I said, I didn't dive too deeply into the reactions, as I want to kind of go in as unspoiled as possible, but these were definitely some of the biggest talking points. In particular, UKITAKE being confirmed to be getting more scenes should make people very happy, I hope. Also, people seem to love the new opening. I personally really liked that first opening for the 1000 Year Blood War arc we had, both the song and the visuals, so I'm very much looking forward to seeing this one. I believe it's the same song from the last trailer we got, so that's great as that's a great sounding track. And again, personally, I'm expecting this opening to look similar to the first opening in that it's going to be mostly featuring one bold colour, and this time again, like I said, based on that last trailer, I think it's going to be blue, and so I'm hoping we're going to get a seriously Quincy themed opening. It would make a lot of sense considering this is their big second attack. We were also treated to some new screenshots as well, some of which show brand new scenes, so I'll just go over those before we wrap up. First up, we have this rather ominous looking shot of Uryu standing beside Yhwach in the Quincy Palace of Silburn. We haven't seen this shot before, but it's of course during the Sternritter meeting where Yhwach reveals Uryu to them all and announces him to be his successor. This exact shot isn't actually found in the source material, but it looks to me like it could be just a slightly different angle of this shot where Yhwach proclaims Uryu to be the last surviving Quincy in this world, or it could be a different version of this shot where Yhwach says they'll see Uryu's power themselves firsthand in the battles to come. And here's hoping they actually do this time. This shot does impress me quite a bit though. The lighting looks absolutely lovely. It's not quite as overbearing as the crystal blue light of some of the initial Silburn scenes we've had, though they were nice too. But it has a moody and mysterious feel to it, and Uryu is drawn incredibly well here. But we can see the lighting allows for more of their natural colour scheme to come through too, which we'll also see later on in some other characters as well. The next new shot, however, is perhaps the most interesting of the bunch. It shows Ichibei approaching Ichigo, presumably at the doors to his personal palace, or at the very least the inner sanctum, where he would later train both Rukia and Renji. As I mentioned in my last trailer breakdown, we don't see Ichigo looking like this ever again, with his full-bring collar and sleeveless shihakusho, after he receives his true Zanpakuto in the source material. So this is all completely new content, presumably after he has just moved on from the last palace. That begs the question though, and I have to wonder, has Ichigo already been to see Senjumaru? It's a shame if she's still getting skipped over completely, considering of all of the members of the Zero Division, the time in her palace was definitely the most truncated in the source material, which is a shame because the brief snippet we got of it, it looked absolutely fantastic, and of all the Zero Division members, she is the one I think is the most intriguing and has easily the coolest design. It's possible she's Ichigo's last stop, though we see from Rukia and Renji's perspective that they visit her before Ichibei, and it makes of course way more sense for Ichibei to be the final stop on the Royal Palace Whistle Stop tour, so it's unlikely I think. In fact, I imagine she's already hard at work on his divine Oken clothing that we'll see him in later. Anyway, as per the synopsis that I read earlier on, the anime's official website mentions that Ichibei himself intervenes to stop Ichigo from leaving the Royal Palace as he's not yet ready to face Yhwach. Now that does make sense to me, though I'm surprised that Ichigo was just going to up and leave the moment he reforged his Zanpakuto. I kind of get him wanting to go back as he's probably anticipating another Quincy attack, and we'll see later on that the attack happens about 3 hours before Ichigo's actually allowed to leave. But I would have thought Ichibei would have already made it clear to him that there was going to be some training involved on his behalf, but I like it nonetheless, and I'm very intrigued by it. Speaking of intrigue, it's very intriguing that we're already getting an early look at Ichimonji here. Why does Ichibei have his Zanpakuto? Is it just the anime team's way of teasing it earlier on, or does it have a practical use in Ichigo's training? I, for one, can't really see Ichibei just kind of casually walking around with it unless he had a reason to use it, so I'm thinking and hoping it is the latter. I could easily see Ichibe's training, for example, consisting of him renaming Ichigo himself to make him incredibly weak, like he does to Yhwach when he renames him as an ant during their fight, and then forcing Ichigo to train in that state for however long, which maybe correlates to why Ichigo is sweating so much in some of the other scenes we've seen him in. Or imagine if Ichigo actually has to fight Ichibei himself, though I'll be honest, I don't think that's too likely. Also, I have a feeling that Ichibei's Futen Taisatsuryo theme will play here, or during one of his scenes here at least, so it probably has no bearing really on where the Cour will end. It's possible we will still get the Ichibei versus Yhwach fight here, but it's also equally possible, I would say, that that music will play at pretty much any time Ichibei is on screen. Regardless, I love seeing more of Ichibei, and similarly to the Sternritter, I'll take any extra scenes I can get with the Zero Division. When it came to the first Cour of this 1000-Year Blood War arc anime, I felt like some of the parts they either skipped over the most or kind of sped through the most were those early stages of the Zero Division's Royal Palace training. But if that is to allow them to spend a bit more time with Ichibei, who is easily the most interesting of the bunch, then I guess I'm kind of all for that. And as I mentioned earlier, it was said that Ichigo will have many new scenes, and supposedly these scenes will delight fans of the source material, so I assume that's going to cover both training and a potential fight in the future. We also get another new shot, this time featuring a conversation between Bazby and Hashwolf, likely from chapter 543, but as I mentioned previously, this time in a different location, the communal Sternritter meeting hall. This is almost certainly their heated conversation about Uryu being appointed Yhwach's successor, and is possibly even this exact sequence on screen now. The final new shot is another cool one. It's a shot of several Sternritter reacting in shock to the news of Uryu's appointment as heir to the Empire. These are the same 6 Sternritter who react to the announcement in the original chapter. Bambietta, Masked Masculine, Asnod, BG9, Nanana, and Robert. It's worth noting that originally this was the page that confirmed to us that both Asnod and Nanana had survived their encounter with Yamamoto in the first invasion. Again though, as with the Uryu image earlier, we can see the lighting is even less intense here than in that first shot. But that's really it for the video, guys. Like I said, it was mostly a disparate collection of new details, updates, and some interesting tidbits regarding what's actually going to go down in the first 2 episodes of the second Cour. I really didn't want to spoil myself too much, so I have tried to shy away from some of the slightly more in-depth reactions from people who got the chance to see those early screenings, but we really don't have very long to wait now until the first episode drops. But let me know in the comments what you thought of this update, what you think of the new screens we're getting, what do you think of the new scenes potentially involving Ichigo, Ichibei, the Bambis, all that sort of thing. Let me know your comments and thoughts down below, I'd love to hear them. But make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't done already. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up to help support me and the channel. And as always, a massive shout out and an enormous thank you goes out to everyone supporting me over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. But until next time, guys, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.